Argumentation is something really important for public speaking and for the many different forms of public speaking, like Model United Nations and negotiation and debate and so on. So that's what we're going to focus on for today. First is argumentation and the process of structuring an argument. And then we're going to talk about proposition and opposition and the differences between them. So let's jump right into it. We have a lot to cover. So first,
did you check attendance?
yeah, that's going to be after the break.
Okay.
Okay, so intro to argumentation. Seek and you shall find. Some of you may be familiar with this format. Some may not, but we're going to go over the whole thing. So first, what is an argument? An argument is the basic building block for persuasive speech. Okay, this is something that we teach in classes when we're teaching for essays, and the same goes for speaking. When we think of what is an argument, what do people mean when they say argument? Because sometimes, especially for students, when they think arguing is when I argue with someone, I verbally disagree, and that's the initial connotation. So we need to correct that argument doesn't only mean verbal fighting. We explain why it's important. So a quote to sort of set the stage. Let's have someone read. Noah, can you read, please?
Sure.
You went on mute again.
Okay. If you can't win the argument, correct their spelling.
Keep going.
And if you can't do that, insult their typography.
Exactly. So thank you. So if you can't win the argument, correct their spelling. If you can't do that, insult their typography. Like say, oh, your spelling is wrong, or the font is not in the right way. And this quote, I think, comes to exemplify just how many ways people have to not deal with the core, which is what the person is saying. And if you're not familiar with this type of example, let's think about, when someone says something and you're like, well, let's say someone recommends a movie. This is a good movie. You're like, well, I don't know. They're always late to things. Or I don't know if we should trust them. I mean, they, didn't order the right kind of pizza, or like different things that aren't related to this person, or even, their taste in the last time's movie was bad, but this is a different movie. There's so many things that come in to disqualify what someone is saying without actually engaging with the content of what they're saying, the argument that there is. So the reason I bring this quote up is for us to focus that what we want to learn to do is to actually engage with the argument, possibly beat the argument, as opposed to finding other ways to disqualify, like your point is great, so I'm going to show why your spelling is wrong, or you didn't, put the right kind of punctuation. So what is an argument? Let's have someone read. Sybil. Sybil, can you please read?
All right. A reason or set of reasons given with the aim of persuading others that an action or idea is right or wrong. A reason, justification, explanation. An argument explains something.
Excellent. Okay, so thank you, Sybil. An argument is a reason or a set of reasons showing that something is right or wrong. It is a justification, an explanation. An argument explains something. And it's very hard in public speech to persuade people without actually giving reasons and building it up. So this leads us to the formula, which I find is very helpful for both speech and writing, which is the SEEK formula for strong arguments. So how do you make an argument first? An argument is S plus E, statement plus explanation. Okay? But how do you make a strong argument? SEEK. SEEK stands for statement, explanation, example, conclusion. Okay, so an argument is just to say something and then say it is because of something else. but that doesn't make it real. That could be an opinion. I think that Zoom is the best video platform for teaching because we're using it right now and it didn't really lag. Okay, but that could be my opinion. You know, there are many different video platforms. Is this correct? That's why an example from the real world is so important to support. I see some of you nodding your heads. Exactly. That's where it comes in. Now, initially, we want those learning how to make an argument to at least explain themselves, not just decide pizza is the best and that's it. But eventually want them to have the reflex of, wait, did I bring some kind of support? Did I bring a warranty? Did I do that? So we're going to go through all the different steps and see how they work together. I see there was a question beforehand. Yes, Noah, unless that's not a question.
Yeah, it is. I wonder if that's what happens nowadays or happened like 2 days ago in the UN. Was it an argument that the US asked for very immediate meeting or immediate solutions? So share with us, because I'm not sure what really happened there.
So let's discuss that in the second part of class when we're with our own groups, like analyzing
You got it.
Okay, so how do you make a strong argument? Let's go through the different steps and see how they work and why each one of the statement, explanation, example, and conclusion are important. Okay, so starting off with statement. What is statement? A definite, clear position on a subject in speech or writing. This position needs to give a positive or negative context. And this is something very, very important because oftentimes students will give something very descriptive that doesn't actually bring an opinion. So let's look at an example of this type of context. Let's have someone read. Tali, can you read us the 4 context examples, please?
Yeah, context. This burger is delicious. Plastic pollution in the ocean is harmful. Fish suffocate in plastic bags. The bus will get us home faster.
Okay, excellent. So I'm asking, first of all, with all of these, let's look at them for a moment and see that each one of them gives us a lot of information. And like I said in the previous slide, gives us a positive or a negative context. Now, what is the word that gives that information? First of all, the burger is delicious. This is like opening. What is the word here that gives us the context?
The adjective.
The adjective.
Okay, which is?
Delicious.
Delicious, exactly. Delicious is positive. I won't say delicious about something that, you know, isn't good. Okay. Fish suffocate in plastic bags. What is the word?
Suffocate.
Suffocate. Suffocating is not a good one. The bus will get us home faster. What is the word?
Faster.
Faster. That's generally seen as not always, but generally seen as a positive.
It's not the bus, it's this bus.
This bus. And the plastic pollution in the ocean is harmful. Which
Harmful.
one is that one?
Harmful.
Harmful. And there's
Plastic.
Plastic, yeah. And also there's a second one there, which is
Pollution.
pollution. Exactly. When going over the slideshow, like I noticed that there's in all of these, we're not lost. Now, at the same time, you can imagine if I'm talking about a burger, I talk about a big, well-done burger with vegetables, which I got at Burger King. Do I have anything positive or negative there?
Yes.
What was it?
Depends who you ask.
Positive.
It depends on how you see it.
That's already our imagination, but I never gave one of these connector words. I said a big, well-done burger with vegetables from Burger King. So if I were to end it with is delicious or is fattening, very different contexts. But you can give a really long descriptive sentence without actually making an argument. And this is something you can see oftentimes. Words doesn't equate argument. I've actually seen in one drill, a student give a 42-word description of a DJ internship without explaining if it was good or bad. So this is why having this positive or negative connotation is like, okay, you've given this description. What do we do with this? And this is something which is very important. So we see here that delicious or suffocate lets us know what to do in just a number of words. So bringing it back to statement, the first building block of an argument, a statement is a definite, clear expression of something in speech or writing. We have 3 examples. Elizabeth, can you please read us the examples?
Can I?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Statement, just a sec. A definite, clear expression of something in speech or writing. Australia is beautiful. Always fly American Airlines. No one should possess nuclear weapons.
Excellent. Okay. Australia is beautiful. What is the word that gives us the positive or negative context?
Beautiful.
Beautiful. Always fly American Airlines. What's the word?
Always.
Always. No one should possess nuclear weapons. What do we see here?
No one should.
No one, exactly. Because you could say nuclear weapons have prevented, a third world war. So again, very much depends on the context. Just because, by the way, if you right now think of an airline that you got terrible service from at some point in the past years, you can definitely replace them with always fly, said airline. You'll be like, no,
Never.
definitely not.
Never fly.
Never fly, exactly. So seeing the always fly, that already would be something that could be off-putting for us. So maybe we don't have experience with American Airlines, but we can see how our comfort or not would go with that. So that's why always fly is important. If I say, for example, I don't know, thinking of other airlines that we've flown, like insert the name, we have our own connotations. We have our own feelings about Australia. We have our own thoughts of nuclear weapons. That's why it's so important that you have words that will describe and explain that, so we know what the person making the statement wants us to think. Okay, let's move on to explanation. Explanation is explain the statement, specifically with the word because. And this is something that I emphasize constantly when teaching argumentation. Avoid the word because, and you may accidentally not explain the statement. So I say, all right, when you give your statement, afterwards you must use the word because. And I'm going to be waiting for it. And as something you can do with students in class is have all of them listen for the becauses. Once they know to listen for it, you can find if one statement multiplies into 5 or becomes a paragraph, or there is no because. So do you have to use the word because? No. Does it make her trickier? Definitely. So especially in the beginning, I recommend it. All right, let's listen to these arguments now with the explanation. Sigal, can you read? You're on mute.
Sorry, I was on mute. Explanation. Explain the statement with the word because. Australia is beautiful because of the coral reef. Always fly American Airlines because they have the lowest prices. No one should possess nuclear weapons because if one goes off, the damage is unthinkable.
Excellent. Thank you. So we see here now, Australia can be beautiful for many reasons. It can be because of the kangaroos and because of the desert, but apparently it's because of the coral reef. Fly American Airlines. Why should I always fly them? Why? There are many, many airlines because they have the lowest prices. No one should possess nuclear weapons because if one goes off, the damage is unthinkable. Until now, we had a statement and we had our imaginations.
Daniel?
Yes.
But there's a slight difference between because and because of, I think. It's not the same.
As in the meaning of because or because of?
Yeah, it's not exactly the same.
You're right. It is not exactly the same. You can say because there is a coral reef. So technically, you're right, but the because still shows an explanation of something. So well noted. Okay, so explanation is clear. We're going to move on to example. Now, this is one of the key differences. And when the person making the argument master is adding examples and getting used to them, it's a really strong reflex to be able to use them. So examples. Let's have, excuse
Bless
me.
you.
Thank you. Okay, example. Give an example, a warranty to prove it's true, to prove that something is true in the real world. Until now was my opinion. I was explaining it. I was explaining why it is correct, but it could be my own opinion, not necessarily something that is true in the real world. Okay, let's have someone read with some examples to see the difference. Debbie, can you please read us the examples?
Sure. Let's see. Sorry, it's a little tiny for me. I'm trying to view it larger. 1 second. It's so tiny. Okay. Example, give an example, warranty to prove it's true. Why can't I open your window? View options. Sorry about that.
No problem. We can have you read a different one if someone else can see it bigger.
Let's just see if I can do 100%. Oh, that doesn't work. Okay, it's the ratio. Yeah, it's just,
would you rather ask someone else for this slide?
I've got it. Okay, sorry about that.
Good job.
Example, give an example or warranty to prove it's true. Australia is beautiful because of the coral reef, which was voted by National Geographic as the best coral diving in the world. Always fly American Airlines because they have the lowest prices. Last month, they had a 50% off deal to every location. No one should possess nuclear weapons because if one goes off, the damage is unthinkable. This one is cut off for me. After the Hiroshima bombing of 1945, along with the huge loss of life, thousands died in pain from dehydration, and the land, that line's cut off.
It was contaminated for decades. All right, excellent. Thank you, Debbie. So we see here 3 examples that now give a reason for why the argument, the statement plus explanation, is correct. So we see here that coral reef now is those beautiful, not because it's my opinion, I saw it was great, because National Geographic, a famous magazine, shows that it is the best coral diving in the world. American Airlines, I can think they're great because of their food, their comfortable chairs, but last month they had 50% off to every location. Do you know any other airline that does that? That's a really strong support for why you should always fly American Airlines. And the nuclear damage, we now have a description about it. Now, looking at this from the other side of someone who wants to now disprove my argument, what do we see? If, let's say right now, someone wants to tell me that Australia is not in fact beautiful, they need to first and foremost dismantle my argument. And there are a few different things they need to do. One is they have to show that either the coral reef is not beautiful or is not something which proves the beauty. I see. And the second thing they need to do is prove why National Geographic is not a good measure. They have to disprove my example and they have to disprove my explanation to be able to challenge my statement. So it's different levels of padding. And that's why this is a strong argument. It's a statement that is correct and gives a positive or negative context. There is an explanation to support it and an example which supports it with real world proof. Now, had National Geographic talked about how Australia has the best, koalas and, wildlife, the example wouldn't support that the coral reef is the reason Australia is beautiful. So it's very important that the explanation and the example are linked to the statement. Something interesting you can see when you write out a Sikh argument is sometimes 2 work and the third doesn't. And you can try to fix it to make sure that the example supports the explanation and the statement. All right, let's move on to conclusion. So conclusion is repeat the statement. Why are, and this seems simple after, explanation needs to be unique and then the example needs to be supported. And so like just repeat the statement. Why? Because we probably said a lot in our speech. We could have got quite emotional in our delivery. And by the end, the audience may forget your point. Your point can be quite elaborate. So always, always, always conclude by reminding the audience what you were talking about. And I see that, all right. So let's look at these now and see how they work as a whole. Sybil, would you like to give us the seek argument in their fullest?
Sure. So we'll start with Australia. Okay. Wait, I have to move the window just a second. Sorry. So Australia is beautiful because of the coral reef, for example. National Geographic as the best coral diving in the world. Okay, and that's why Australia is beautiful. So
excellent. Wait, pause for 1 second. Did you all hear that? Even if we stop paying attention, it brought us back in the end. That's like, all right, we're talking about why Australia is beautiful.
But
okay?
Isn't it repetition?
Repetition is great. Repetition is very important in any of the disciplines of public speaking, especially. What I'll oftentimes tell students is how many times, I'll ask you all, how many times do we need to see an ad to remember it?
19 times.
19 times. So the science, one of the numbers used quite a bit is 7. We need to see something 7 times for it, especially right now. And the excess information on billboards and when we're watching YouTube, just like everywhere. So with the bombardment of information that we have, repetition is key. So is it repetition? Yes. And that is so important.
It depends on the place when to repeat. If repetition is like the first time, then the second time, then the third time, it's boring and you just lose focus. But how it's done here, it's at the beginning and at the end. Because of what you said, there were explanations and examples, so it made us lose focus. So it depends where we repeat it.
So I would say on this measure and on this measure alone of memorability, even if the audience gets bored, at least they will remember.
You're not here. Here is a good placing. I mean,
no, I'm saying if on this specific, but yeah, you're right. Here it's definitely useful because of the journey that it takes you on.
Mm-hmm.
Let's go through the other 2 examples. I will read them. Always fly American Airlines because they have the lowest prices. For example, last month they had 50% off deal to every location, and that's why you should always fly American Airlines. And now for the more emotional one. No one should possess nuclear weapons because if one goes off, the damage is unthinkable. For example, after the Hiroshima bombing of 1945, along with the huge loss of life, thousands died in pain from dehydration, and the land was contaminated for decades. And that's why no one should possess nuclear weapons. Okay, so we see here that if through the argument, you can take the audience on quite a journey, and each layer is supporting the next one. No one should possess nuclear weapons because of the horrible damage. For example, here's a description of the types of damage. People were like flash burned into you see their silhouettes on the walls. It was horrific. And that's why the damage of such things happening is why no one should possess nuclear weapons. All right. So we see how each of the pieces, and we feel it in our brain, and we feel it inside of us, oh, that comes full circle. A piece is not missing. Instead of, for example, now listen to the following. Always fly American Airlines because they have the lowest prices. Last month, they had a really special and tasty sushi meal for everyone flying to Japan. And that's why you should always fly American Airlines. So you're like, wait a minute, A to B, but what does that have to exactly? So that's the kind of feeling we want to think. So with the Japan example or the nuclear weapon one, it came together. And sometimes it can feel disjointed. All right, so going over this, let's review how to make a good argument. Together, statement, explanation, example,
conclusion.
Great. Okay, so we're now going to move on to the next part. Are there any questions on argumentation before we go on to proposition opposition? None? Excellent. Okay. So this is pretty straightforward, and there are many different uses that we can find for this format. But specifically for our class use moving forward, we want to take this into first learn the theory of proposition and opposition, and then bring it to our various speaking disciplines. For example, public speaking, as we're learning it in this course, or Model United Nations. So proposition and opposition. For those familiar with debate, you have seen these terms before. For those who are not, we'll give a quick introduction and show how this connects. I think this is, by the way, very useful for any type of teaching that you want students to defend an opinion, even if they're, reading an opinion without having another side opposing them, to help them with that type of clarity. Just like, what is your statement? There needs to be a positive or negative context. We need to understand this. So let's start with proposition. Michal, can you please read to us proposition?
A declarative sentence that affirms a clear position on a subject.
All right, keep going.
Number 2, a person, a team who supports the idea which is proposed.
Excellent. So a proposition is, first of all, a sentence which shows a clear position, which is our statement. But a proposition is also a person or team who support that idea. So that's the proposition. The proposition chooses, like whoever is the proposition, or is given a statement which they need to defend and show why is more correct than the opposite of it. So if the proposition is a person, if we are now the proposition defending that opinion, it can be a statement we bring ourselves. For example, video conference learning is really helpful, or a statement that we are given. And that usually is the topic you will have for a public speaking competition, or the motion of a debating competition, or the topic of a Model UN simulation. So more often than not, in speech exercises, you're given the position and you need to do the best that you can with it. Okay, so that's the proposition. It's the opinion and the statement which we need to show is more correct. What is the opposition? The opposition, this is very important, is the exact opposite of what the proposition says, or a person or team who oppose the idea proposed by the proposition. Now, what's important here is this: it needs to be the exact opposite of what is seen in the proposition. If it is anything else, it isn't actually opposing. So for example, if I say I'm hungry and I want to get a pizza, and Jason says, this room is too cold, are we opposing each other?
Nope.
No, right, because I can get a pizza and he can turn on the heat. And this is something which I say is especially important when we're looking at the Model UN theory that we've learned over the past weeks. Because we can work with anyone who doesn't say the opposite and oppose what we say. So let's look at some examples of how this works.
Can I ask you something?
1 second, I'll do the examples and then we'll take questions. So example 1, proposition. We should lengthen school days until 6 o'clock. Do we all have feelings about this? Do we want the school day to continue to 6 p.m.? Probably not. Okay, so the opposition to this isn't, well, I mean, some things it isn't. It isn't we should keep the school day at 4, because not all of us finish our school days at 4 or at 2. The opposition would need to be, we should not lengthen school days to 6 o'clock. Okay? The opposition is the opposite of this statement. For those who have done debate, you could see that there are different ways to oppose this proposition. And it's just something in general, when you're opposing a proposition, there's the way that we assume it to mean, but it doesn't mean that it has to go this way. For example, when all of us saw the proposition of lengthening the school day until 6 o'clock, most of us were like, oh God, no, right? Yeah, we'll see some, we're like, we don't want to work till 6, but opposing this and looking at from the other perspective of those who are, parents, and imagine if we could, keep the kids in childcare until, 6 or 7 at night, that could be great. So opposing this could be, some could say, the school day should stay shorter, we have lives, but you could also oppose saying, you know what, no, 6 o'clock isn't enough. School should go till 9 p.m. So there are different ways to oppose we may not want to argue that, but when you're opposing a topic, there are many different ways to oppose. So this is why we shouldn't assume that the opposition is shorter, but we have to say that we are saying the opposite. So the opposition is we should not lengthen the days until 6 o'clock. We cannot. It has to be the exact opposite of what is said. Anything else risks not opposing. Okay, let's look at a second example. We should make all books free access after 10 years from their release. All right, so repeating the idea, any book published by any author instead of 100 years of copyright can be freely accessed to everyone 10 years after they're released. Now, is this a good idea? Is it not? Will authors who write books now have less of an incentive? Will this open market result in a better world with more creativity? How does this affect, wealthy authors? How does this affect beginner authors? We have many different ideas, but when we're looking to oppose it, the opposing it needs to be, we should not make all books free access after 10 years from their release. The opposition, what I want to show here is we need to oppose, exactly say the opposite of what is said. And if the proposition more uniquely defines what it is, for example, we should make all cookbooks free access 10 years after their release. We are now opposing cookbooks, not books. And if you're not saying the opposite thing, you're not actually disagreeing. Okay, Deb, you have a question or a comment?
Right, I was just going to say that from what I've learned about proposition, usually the proposition is proposing a change from the way we live now, from the status quo, which means that they have a burden to basically demonstrate how it would work in reality, or they have a burden to offer or explain a mechanism.
Correct. So if for those who are doing debate, yes, the proposition is offering a motion, which is the form of what is being discussed, with the purpose of showing how something different from the status quo is better. So yes, specifically for debate, that is the format of proposition. However, for theory, the proposition is anyone who proposes something. For example, if I am proposing less, masks in the, special mask garbages for, protective masks, so they don't end up in the ocean or in landfills, because there's so many of them. So that's also a possibility. But in its base, a proposition is some kind of thing that they are proposing. It doesn't even need to be a deviation from the status quo. It can just be the proposition of something, whoever says it, and the opposition is whoever is opposing it.
Okay, yeah, or it could be an innovation on something that exists. Fair enough. Okay.
But the proposition, but I'm saying like in public speech, for example, proposition is just a claim. It doesn't even have to be, it can be saying, I feel, running in the morning at 6 o'clock is healthy.
Okay.
So like you're absolutely right. And in debate formats, it usually falls under that category. But in general, if I'm a proposition for something, I just need to make a statement that I'm willing to back up. And the second you oppose it, if I went first, that's where it is. All right. Okay. So let's wrap this up with two concluding thoughts. So first of all, important is the opposition needs to say the opposite of the proposition. If their idea is not directly opposed, the sides are not debating. You're not disagreeing with someone else if you don't oppose what it is that they say. Now, this can be confusing if whoever is speaking is not, super clear and organized. So before we oppose, I want to offer the following suggestions. So first, turn the points of the other side into a statement. When you're listening to them say, okay, they seem to be saying this. let's write now as a statement what it is that they're saying. Then write out the reverse statement. See that it still works. And finally, make sure you're opposing what you intend to oppose. And this is a part which I feel is an important due diligence, because sometimes you can write out their statement and go, wait a minute, what they're saying or what I'm opposing is not what I mean to oppose. This, or they may not be saying what I think they're saying, because certain words can trigger us and have associations that aren't the whole story. And this is why it's so important for us when we are arguing to make sure that, first of all, we see what the other side is actually saying, and we end up responding to it. Because sometimes you can be surprised and go, wait a minute, by writing this down, what I thought I was responding to isn't actually responding to what they said. I just got triggered by some of the words. And if we remember from just life in general, and I believe the public speaking group learned about triggers and anchors, some words can throw us into all sorts of states of mind and thinking. And that's why it's so important for us to sort of zero and say, okay, let's respond to what was said. Not what we would like to have said, not what we wish they would have said, not what we could, pretend that they said, but to respond to what they actually said and really address their argument. All right, so are there any questions on proposition and opposition?
I have some comments after the questions.
All right, seeing no questions at the moment, I'm going to turn it over to Jason.
Thank you so much, Daniel. That was a great lesson, a very important one. I want to just summarize the big points, which were arguments, the reasons to do something. And that's important because it leads us to a very simple classroom way to remember what we're doing, which is asking the question why and answering because. Why? Because. Why? Because. So that's a very easy link that can help guide participants into this. All this comes together in proposition and opposition. It comes together to improve critical thinking. It comes together to find ways that aren't necessarily what we believe, but to express a different side. For example, in the Model UN class and the public speaking class, we dealt with the North Korean food shortage situation, where many of us said we don't want to punish the people of North Korea for their government's actions. And that's what we truly believe. None of us as people want to punish a third party because they are subject to tyranny. But from a critical thinking standpoint, the opposition is important. It's important to ask the question, should we punish the people to put pressure on the government? And that's the position of the opposition. And it's a really clear case where it's not something that's really morally acceptable for us to do in school as a belief that we hold, but it is something that's important that we all learn how to express the opposite opinion of what we hold and to defend it, to find its merits. We're going to be talking more about that in our groups during the exercise and the practices, where we're going to be making Sikh arguments and trying to strengthen and sharpen our points using statements, explanation, examples, and conclusion. And in conclusion, I want to thank Daniel for putting together such a great presentation that really explains these ideas. Daniel, back to you. You're on mute.
Yeah, of course. Okay, so that was the class. Want to thank everyone for joining us. And we're going to take a short break right now and come back to practice what we learned. So thank you all very much.